Hey basketball coaches and basketball players, my name is Alan from Al's Basketball Training, and today I'm going to talk to you about zone defenses and simple zone defenses in basketball. Now, really quickly, a zone defense in basketball is when you're guarding an individual area of the court instead of a singular individual player of the other team. Now, before we get down to the clipboard, check out my Unbeatable and Perimeter Basketball Defense books in the link in the description below. Okay, so first we're going to start with a 1-3-1 zone defense. This is actually a very simple defense. Some coaches make it look like a more aggressive or more difficult zone to really run, but it really isn't. I really like this zone because it covers the high post, unlike every other zone. Other than, of course, my Unbeatable and Perimeter Basketball Defense books. But anyways, I digress back to the 1-3-1. And that is basically, we've got player 1, he's going to be defending the point. Then we have player 3, he's going to be defending the wing. Then we have player 2, who's going to be defending the other wing. Then we have player 5, who's guarding the high post, and player 4, who is guarding the low post. Now, why am I starting player 5 in the high post? There's actually a really good reason for this. And that reason is I personally like to have players 4 and 5 continuously switch in those positions. So what I mean by that is, let's say we get some offense onto the court. So we have, let's say, an overload offense starting up. 1-3-1-1 is going to look similar to this. Now, the whole main idea of a zone offense or an overload offense is to get that ball into the high post. At least now we have the ability to guard that player. But let's say they ran some kind of a swing where they want to swing that ball around towards the other side. And now they're swinging that ball around. Well, what we can do is when they swing that ball around, let's say they ran something similar to this. Well, now let's say they pass into the low post really quickly. We could have player 5 attack down, which is a better angle to block a shot than this one, because if we come across the net to block a shot, that net gets in the way. Player 5 coming down to contest is a much better option. That way we can now pop back up with player 4 and we can rotate our players. I hope this area makes sense right now because, of course, this can be a bit difficult, but in my mind it's just simple. If you have a better angle, then you switch with player 4. So again, we have one player playing the point, we have a player at the high post, a player in the low post, and players along the wings. Super simple defense until it gets to these two players switching, but in reality, if there's a player, all you have to do to explain this to your players is if there's a player in the low post who's open, and then another player in the low post who has the ball, what you just need to do is have player 4 slide down. It slides you into a 3-2 zone defense, and then whoever can recover back towards the high post first. Let's say player 3 goes up to the high post after passing it out. Player 5 would just follow. We're back into that 1-3-1. Now this next zone defense is called the 2-1-2. This is a zone defense that we ran on my club team back when I was a player in high school and I was the middle player. This zone is supposed to really confuse the opponent into thinking that you're playing a 3-2 zone at first, and then once they swing that ball around towards the wing or down into the low post, you switch it into what looks like a 2-3. Now, if you've made your team understand what a 2-3 and a 3-2 zone really is, this defense should be super simple to learn. Let's get down to the clipboard. Let's check out the 2-1-2. So there's a few different ways of setting it up. With me, also with the team that I used to play on, we had the center in the middle. Meanwhile, teams like South Korea, they'll actually have their point guard in the middle, which is a little bit different on how they run it, but they've got a pretty tall point guard, and he's very agile, and that's why they did that, and it works really well. So again, even though these are zone defenses, basic zone defenses, you can still turn them into what works for your team. But again, it doesn't really matter how it's set up. A 2-1-2 is still a 2-1-2 zone. So basically how it's set up is player 5, in this case, will guard the whole middle. Meanwhile, player 3 is going to be guarding the wing, same as player 1. 2 is guarding the other wing, and same as player 4. Now, the whole idea here is if the ball is up top, whether or not it's player 5, it doesn't matter. Player 5 red will be up top. If the ball gets swung around, now what we're going to be having is player 5 starting to guard that middle area here. If there's a player in the low post and player 3 had to pop out, player 5 pops down, and we're going to see players 4 and 2 swing over. If the ball goes down into the low corner, it's going to be single coverage. And then, if there's a player in the high post, this is still a weak area. However, you could instruct your player 5 to guard the outside of player 4 while still having his hands up, who should be able to guard that area of the court, depending on how tall or how big or how old your players are. So if that ball does go into that high post, he can cover with his hands up, and then player 3 can come in and front face player 4. This rotation has to be super fast. This cannot be a slow rotation. So you have to keep that in mind and explain that to your players, that when player 5 goes up, player 3 needs to sprint quickly back down. Player 1 then drops so that he's defending 2 players. Now the next zone defense is a 2-3. This is the most widely used zone defense at the youth level. And there's so many times that I have seen teams running a 2-3 zone defense, and this is how the defense is being ran. And the coach isn't yelling at his players. He is sitting on the bench like this, because he knows and he thinks that a 2-3 zone is the be-all and end-all of under 9 basketball, and he knows that that's going to beat every single team. But the players are standing there, not moving, like this. And then when the ball gets passed around, they go like this. It's the funniest thing ever. They don't teach the rotations, or at least some coaches don't. I'm not saying every coach, don't get mad at me. I'm not saying every coach doesn't teach the rotations. But I wish, at least right now, from what I've seen this past year, and some of the under 10, under 11 games that I've seen this year, I wish I was coaching the under 10 age, because I would just say, just dribble past them. They're not moving. If they finally do collapse on you, you pass it. Anyways, let's see what the 2-3 zone is. So the 2-3 zone is very simple. There's 2 players up top, 3 players in the bottom. Believe me, you do not want your players at any level to go outside of that 3-point line. If the other coach is smart, they are going to be running a very wide 5 out. The reason why they would do this is so that they can spread out your players. So now there's huge gaps that they can attack. And that's why you need to play super tight on the 2-3. The 2-3 is not meant to guard a 3-point shot. That's what the perimeter basketball defense is for in the description below. But what this is made for is to block everything going into the key. You need to play it super tight, and basically these are the zones. Any of the overlapping areas, these are double team locations. So for example, if player 2 was there, in theory, that should be a double team. This is how the players should then move. If the ball is in the top, it should be a double team up top, and it should be the bottom 3 players playing a bit higher. This is how the ball should be rotated. If there's a ball in the low post, there should be player 4 playing on that side, player 5 playing on this side, player 2 playing the high post, player 1 playing the high post, player 3 guarding the middle. This should be a very tight zone defense. Now moving over to the next zone. The next zone is actually made to really guard that perimeter, and that's the 3-2 zone. This is 3 players on the top, 2 players in the bottom, and let me explain this. This is a great zone as well. So in the 3-2 zone defense, what your defense is going to look like, there's 2 different ways of playing this. I'm going to let you know right now. So one way is to have player 4 guard that massive area and player 5 to guard that massive area. And then you'll have player 3 guarding this area, player 1 guarding this area, and player 2 guarding that area. Nobody really playing the middle. This is why the high post is so deadly against zone defenses, especially a 3-2. Now, the idea behind this is again, if there's any players in those overlapping areas, it should be a double team. This is why I like to instruct every single player I ever coach, no matter what age, if they're going up against a zone defense, just to attack the gaps. What I mean by that is this would be a gap, this would be a gap, this would be a gap, and this would be a gap, because by attacking the gaps, you're collapsing the defense. You can kick it out, attack the gap again, and keep on going until you have somebody who's open from maybe the weak side. Let's say you attack that gap, pass to player 2, attack that gap, pass down to player 5, and lay up. That's how I would instruct how to beat a 3-2 with like 9-year-olds. And that's just an easy way. You don't really need an offense at all either. Another way of running the 3-2 zone defense is actually having player 1 guard the whole top, having player 4 guarding that zone. So we'll have player 1 guarding the top, player 4 guarding that zone, player 5 guarding that zone, and then we would have player 3 guarding the wing and player 2 guarding the wing. This is another way of running a 3-2 zone, and it's pretty effective. This is actually a way that some university teams in the NCAA run the 3-2 zone, and how they do this is by really focusing on trying to force that player towards that corner, so that when they get that player down into that corner, and then they're able to force him baseline. And as soon as they force him baseline, player 4 drops down, and at this point, he can't pass across because there's a backboard in the way. He can't do a hammer pass out because we have player 5 guarding that whole side. And then we would have player 2 guarding the high post, and player 1 moving down for any kickouts out here. So this is how you can run the 3-2 at an older age group. This is kind of a hard way of explaining to maybe 11-year-olds, but this is a very valid way of running a 3-2 zone. Now, even though this is a 11, 12, 13 minute video, this is still a brief overview of the zone defenses that are the easiest to run. Now, if you want something more advanced, or if you want something that's a little bit more of a deadly zone, go check out my Unbeatable Basketball Defense and the Perimeter Basketball Defense books in the description below. And of course, if you have any questions, go and leave a comment below. I love to answer every single one, and I'll see you guys again in my next video.